here I go. Okay, limits lesson 2. We're just going to talk about some tougher limits. So we have a background of those 4 basic methods. Substitution. Okay, if substitution doesn't work because it creates a mathematical error, then we got to try something else, like eliminating the problem, maybe factoring and canceling. We can try just plugging in closer and closer values, or we can analyze what's going on. Okay, so number 1, obviously I can't use substitution. Putting that h in creates a undefinable answer, dividing by h. Okay, so I think here I'm going to try to see what happens if I FOIL this out. Okay, so 4 plus h squared is 16 plus 8h, h squared minus 16. Okay, so now I can see that the 16s will cancel. So the limit as h approaches 0 of my new equation. Okay, I'm going to factor an h out of the top. And now I can cancel the limit as h approaches 0 of this. Okay, at this point I can officially plug that 0 in for that h, so I don't need to write the limit in front anymore. Okay, you have to keep this limit in front the whole time to this point because you haven't substituted that 0 in. So if this was 0, we would approach 8. Okay, so that was eliminate the problem. That was our method. Okay, so here I can't do this, so you can try it on your calculator. 0 to the 0, it's not going to work. Okay, so I'm going to pick the method of getting closer and closer to this. So if I try 0.0, I'm going to try that, and then also coming from the other side. But I do understand that these would be the same because I am just doing the absolute value of both of them. So I can see that those will be the same. Okay, so as we get closer and at 0.01, we're at 0.9594. So that would be the same. And then 0.001 is 0.993. So what is happening? I can see that I'm getting closer and closer and closer to a value of 1. Okay, next one, I cannot plug a 5 in. I get a divide by 0. So I'm going to try the method of getting closer. So I'm going to plug in 4.9, a 4.99. I'm going to plug in a 5.1 and a 5.01. So you can see that I got closer to 5 from the left and closer to 5 from the right. Okay, so let's say when we're at 4.9, this is negative 49. And when we're at 4.99, we're at negative 499. At 5.1, we're at 51. At 5.01, we're at 501. Okay, so what are we approaching? So I can see on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if this was 5, okay, as I'm getting closer here, it looks like this is happening. And and as I'm going towards 5 from this way, it looks like this is happening. So I have no limit here. Okay, as you're coming this way, you're going towards negative infinity, and here you're going towards positive infinity. So obviously there's an asymptote behavior there, and you're going to have no limit. Okay, next, for this one, I'm going to use the analyzing method to understand what's going on. So 7 to the infinity and 9 to the infinity, I would understand that this is getting bigger faster. Okay, and then I would say, well, what happens when the bottom gets bigger faster? Then you approach 0, because it's more and more and more of a fraction, getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Okay? Another way you could have wrote it to think about it was like this. And when we repeat a fraction, so like for instance 1/2, and if we keep repeating 1/2, right? 1/4, the next, right? 1/2 cubed would become 1/8, right? So that's just an example of what happens with fractions. Okay, as you have infinity as your exponent, this is just going to become closer and closer to 0. Okay, next. This time our limit is approaching negative infinity. Okay, so what happens, let's just give you an example here on the side. Something like that, when you have a negative exponent. What is the rule with a negative exponent? This can turn into 1/4 to a positive exponent. So you can reciprocate and then change your exponent. So this, that's with negative infinity, but I could change this to 7 to the infinity, 5 to the infinity, right? Or if I want to think about it like this. Okay, so when a number that's greater than 1 keeps repeating and multiplying, you're just getting bigger and bigger. Or we could talk about bigger, faster on the top. So if our top is getting faster, we are approaching infinity. Okay, next. We have to talk about what happens as we have something like this. So as our bottom would get closer and closer to 0. Okay, so let me just give you an example here. So if my bottom was 1/10, and then I got closer to 0, so then I would become something like 1/100. So you could see that I'm getting closer and closer to 0. What is 1 divided by 1/10? It would be the same as timesing by the reciprocal, so it would be 10. So this would be 100. So as this bottom number gets closer to 0, our number gets closer to infinity. Okay, so thinking about that, 1 divided by, as we approach 0, this exponent will approach infinity, and that will approach infinity. Okay, so now we have to talk about what's going on. So this is a large number plus 5. So like 7 trillion million plus 5, this is irrelevant. And then this is 9 billion trillion plus 4, so this is really irrelevant. Okay, but if we compare these two numbers, this one would be bigger. So now we can conclude that this will approach towards 0. Okay. Now, same thing, that this, if this is approaching 0, this is going to approach infinity. Okay, so now This is going to be something like 7 billion trillion and 5, so this is irrelevant. 7 billion trillion and 10, this is pretty irrelevant. 7 billion trillion divided by 7 billion trillion, okay, these are the same rate, and they're both positive, so they're going to divide to be positive 1, getting closer to 1. Okay, something new, this is now approaching 0 from the negative side. So just like over here, so I'm going to think about what's going to happen here. So from the negative side, I'm going to pick a number like -1 over 10. And then if I get closer to 0 from the negative side, I could go -1 over 100. So what does this turn into? -10, -100. So as this approaches 0, this approaches -infinity. Okay? So there's your rules. So if the bottom approaches 0 from the positive side, you're positive infinity. If you approach 0 from the negative side here, you go to -infinity. Okay, so that's what I'm thinking about now. Okay, so what happens with -infinity? You could change it to a fraction in the bottom. Give me 2 seconds, Haley. And then here, I'm also going to change that to a 3 on the bottom to infinity. And then I'm going to talk about what happens here. So this 7 to infinity is large on the bottom, so this approaches 0, and this would approach 0. So it looks like we would have 4 plus 0, and then 5 plus 0, which would approach 4/5.
Mommy, now can I talk? Can